Good afternoon, everybody. Eddie Webb. I want to welcome you to the New Media Lab here at Mesa Community College. And it is an honor and a privilege today. We have our new Vice President, Administrative Services, Rob Budach, and my co-host.
I am Dr. Ton Hypley, and I am the Education Program here at Mesa Community College. And it's just an honor and a joy to be here.
And for the first time, we have a student representative on our podcast.
Bernard Hope.
Bernard Hope, y'all, is a re-entry student. He is 72-year-old decorated Vietnam veteran. And we are so privileged to have you here, Bernard. Bernard spent 16 weeks doing an in-depth research project on the engineering and art of podcasting. So he is here with us today.
Thank you.
Our first question of the day: when did you realize you really like to count money?
So sort of carrying on, the origin story. I was going to become really quickly a retention statistic when I was an undergraduate. And my first semester was really quickly going to become crash and burn. The story of it, I think, really begins, and it changed for me. I mean, I think the first year experience is challenging for everyone. 18, years old, first time away, first time with a lot of responsibilities. I did want to challenge myself and leave a little bit further from my home. The school I went to was not a convenient, I'm just going to go home for dinner tonight type thing. And so, it was not going well for me, my first semester. And it was through a community that I lived in Carlson Hall. It's 110 young men living in that building that, assigned to that building at first glance doesn't feel like a good thing. The reputation around it is like, oh, you got assigned to the zoo and any of this kind of stuff. And all they do down there is make a mess and party. It ended up not being any of that. And it was a transformative experience. And I ended up living in that building for 4 years, and it has no air conditioning. In the winter, it had steam-powered coil heaters in every room, which today would be just like a parent lawsuit waiting to happen from it. And the community really, I think, embraced and enveloped me, and I got through that. And so, for the vast majority of my career, I would say that my desire was simply to look out for other people that felt the way that I was feeling, that the sense of loneliness and failure, and help them be successful, and more importantly, help them feel a part of a connectedness to a community. And, I had stayed, as you can see from the bio sheet in front of me, I've stayed working in student housing in different capacities, at ASU and at different schools. I was a hall director, my first job out of college. But, as you kind of mature in your career, there's a point where I was probably not as effective anymore doing impact on the individual level with students. And so I wanted to have an impact at the policy level. And I realized that, I love working with students on sort of a one-to-one basis. If we can no longer afford the residence halls, or if the residence halls are falling apart, or if the complexity of our third-party agreements are making such that their experience is terrible, then everything that I care about is for naught. And so I just sort of dedicated myself that I just wanted to figure this out and make it work. I don't think I'm sort of a native bean counter, if you will, from any of it. I think I was sort of called to serve in a different capacity, and I just had to learn these skills in order to be effective what I'm doing here. And I think that's the lens by which how I probably approach this role too. There are so many people that I've met here that are, stakeholders just seem sort of dry. They genuinely care about this place. And so, it's my job to help figure out this complexity, and it's $111 million deep of a complexity, to see if we can get us back to a place where everybody can, have the joy that we've had. And, if we could go back to just 2 years ago, we'd actually be in a really great place right now, because we didn't spend a whole lot a couple of years ago and any time prior to that. And so I think that there's a way to do that, and I'm excited to be a part of it with everyone.
Earlier, we were talking about one of our favorite movies. We all really enjoyed Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And one of my favorite scenes from there was when George Clooney says, "We're in a tight spot."
Pete's cousin turned us in for the bounty.
Don't try nothing fancy.
We're in a tight spot.
And so I was thinking about that in preparation for our meeting today, that we definitely are in a tight spot. And so you referenced 2 years ago, we weren't here. So based on your analysis of the data, how did we get here? How long will we be here? And what will it take for us to get out of here?
So I think that there's so many ways to answer this question. I don't think that let me just say, I don't think it's the responsibility of any single individual. There's a lot of factors that come into it. I'll just say first that higher ed in general is not, in my opinion, the best at managing money. And so I'll give a great example of it. When you're 18 years old and you take like an ACT or an SAT and you start getting all kinds of letters in the mail, that probably doesn't happen anymore. It's probably all email traffic. But you get every flyer from every college that's trying to recruit you. And their promo picture is whatever equivalent old Main or old Gothic or Main building they have, with a student in front of it, typically holding a Starbucks or some sort of modern trapper keeper, looking very academic from it. See yourself here, right? Like invest in yourself or be a part of this or whatever tag slogan. And that beautiful building behind them is gorgeous, and it might be 60 years old, it might be 100 years old. And there's probably very few people at the college that even has any clue about how to care for that building from it. But it sure works great in marketing from it. And so, it's that kind of stuff that comes up. It's look at what's happening, what's going on. We didn't even realize that, and in presenting all the data to the college right here, there's a lot of things where people are like, wow, we didn't even realize. We kind of knew it was getting out of control. We kind of go into that kind of stuff. So, I think the first thing about all this stuff is taking a look and saying, one, it's sharing with everyone, and conversations that I've had, people kind of look at themselves and do this like, yeah, well, we kind of know that. Yeah, do that. So there's a little bit of auto-correcting that goes into it. And I think that there's an element where my role comes in and just sort of serves as a little bit of a referee from it. There's a lot of, I think, practices of like, well, we need this. Okay, well, how are we informing this decision with data? And what are the downstream effects of it? And again, not everyone here has, got proficiencies in understanding a budget. And so sometimes we make a decision based on sort of qualitative factors without considering the impact on it. And I think that the more that you realize that when you're spending money here, you're spending money that belongs to everyone in the same pot, it starts to have a positive effect of making everyone realize, well, what should I have that's fair for me? And I don't want to go over because I don't want to be someone that takes away from someone else from it. And it's identifying those pieces from all of it. I think it's part of work of saying, and I don't like to get into the place of doing cuts because I feel like, especially coming in for 5 months of being here and so forth, we're going to come in and look at this and just carve up the budget and so forth. There's, money is an emotional vehicle. We have an emotional attachment. Money conveys where we put our values into. And so these are not a conversation that a bean counter like myself or your finance officer or any, we don't make decisions in a vacuum here. These are conversations that the community needs to come together. And, I'll say it's a common theme since I've been here, right? We've had, 10 presidents in 10 years or less than that, 4 vice presidents of admin services. So that's kind of a revolving door here. But most of the faculty that I've met, many of the staff that I've met, how long have you been here? 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and so forth like that. So, these are people that we really need to engage from all of it because these are your real stakeholders that have sustained this place, in some cases in front of, probably not the best leadership that we've had in the past from it. And, my goal is to flow with that current and not try and flow against it.
Please don't leave us. Please, I beg you. I don't want to sound needy, but.
Right. Well, I mean, like I said, flow with the current and not against it.
I think you're one of the people that I have talked to that has an intelligence about finance that makes sense and is comforting to people instead of scary.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's confusing when you are ordered by President 1 to build a room like this, and then President 2 to put it all together, and then President 3 to expand it, and then President 4 to cut it. And it's very frustrating for people. How does all of those layers lead us to a place that we were in, of this fear deficiency stuff. Like, I can't do anything about that, right? I don't know that, I'm doing the things I've been charged to do. And it has resulted in me going back to the statutes in our legal system, downtown, and to understand how the statute reads in order that gives us the privilege of garnering taxes from our citizens and our business, right? And the main crust of that over a 60-year period is, first, teachers are the architect of the community college. In the beginning, the financial agreement was 90-10. 90% of our budget was to go specifically to teaching and learning, and 10% for administrators to make sure we were compliant. That is completely flipped. And it's almost like we've gotten to a place where student enrolling for courses and then hiring faculty to teach those courses has become the biggest burden or stressor on our budget, which to me seems very ironic. And I don't know, with all that built-in infrastructure, how did we get there into this place of deficiency? But to hear the way you talk about it, let me tell you, man, thank you. I mean, that's 60 years there. But the idea that, to bring us back, that we're all into this together, and you're not going to cut stuff, but if you want us to give up a little and they give up a little, and that's healthy stuff. How's that working for you?
So, let me just say that the good role models that I've seen that work in finance represent themselves as people that are, it's human to have an opinion, but in the professional context, you don't have an opinion because you let the data speak for itself. When you talk about dollars, you're talking about people's values. They make choices of where to allocate those dollars, and those dollars represent something. And I talked about this today in a presentation earlier. The goal moving forward is not perfection. The goal is improvement. And my presentations are about hopefully getting people excited about what type of control can you have over your slice of our grand pie together that makes you more effective as a leader so that you don't necessarily feel as lost in it. How do you think about your work differently from it? And I say this having, originated my career without a quantitative background at all. I mean, I was in student affairs and student housing and student development from it. And then moving to having more of a data-driven framework of how to talk about my work. With respect to the work that I think the Budget Steering Committee has done this semester, the piece that I am most proud of it is that the multi-million dollars, okay, and I'm saying over $3 million, okay, of budgeted identified cuts, okay, so something that is actually in our budget, I shouldn't say cuts, from it, the things that we are not spending right now, is something that all three divisions and faculty have come together and have been a part of contributing to that number. And it's simply by saying, look at all the positions right now that we have paid for, we can't afford. We could purchase these. We are choosing not to this year. We're going to figure out how to reallocate the work. We're going to figure out how to make this work, get through this year. So, I think that, and I joked a little bit this morning, the Budget Steering Committee was my first sort of introduction to how do we form representative shared governance groups, in the district. And so, I'm sort of like, well, who should be there? And I'm asking questions, and it's like, well, exempt and non-exempt, classified, not classified, student affairs, academic affairs, faculty. As I said, left-handed people, right-handed people, tall people, short people, they all need to be there at the table. Okay, well, we're up to 30, we're up to 30 people now from all of it. Is this a work group, or are we doing more presentations here, or how is this going to work? And on that first meeting, I think there was certainly tension. Like, everybody was getting ready for me to be Shang Tsung in a Mortal Kombat match. Ready? Round one. Round one will be student affairs programs versus academic affairs programs. Who's going to stay? And that's absolutely not how we started those conversations. And we've never had something like that. And I hope no one feels that we have either. And if they have and you're listening to this, then please come and tell me from it. But, we're looking at where it's about fostering a community of we're all stakeholders of the college and we don't make any decision in a vacuum. So let's, rather than kind of do sort of a trial by combat here, what is relevant to what we need? What is some of the history and the context of this? Because I've been here 5 months from it. What do we need to know that is representative of the college from it? And so I'll give an example of what I said yesterday at the Red Mountain campus, right? If we had a conversation about, maybe we need to close down the Cienega, right? There's costs associated with the Cienega, right? That would be sort of to some extent, almost a mortal wound type thing to some of the people that are stakeholders of that community. Same reaction you would get here if we talked about the Rose Garden for it, or maybe the new media lab come in it. And so, I don't find that. And then, if you actually look at the amount of money for some of those things that we would be saving, in some cases it might be good, in some cases it might be not, but it wouldn't solve the $3.5 million problem. And so, even if we went in increments of 10,000, all right, and that's a pretty expensive program, $10,000. That's a good chunk of money. If we, as a group, came together and said, let's identify as many $10,000 programs as we can to get to 3.5 million, we'd have to go through 350 different things. We'd be there forever. It's not efficient. And so, I think that, and I think the data shows this, there's really only two ways to solve our problem for this year. And I frame it as this year, which is we have to spend $3.5 million less. And that really boils down to a hiring pause, hiring freeze, it's commonly called, but hiring pause from it. And then identifying sections and improving efficiencies by closing some course sections, raising some classroom sizes, and all that together has produced this is where we're getting large chunks of money in savings to going into all of it. Now, well, let me end this question by adding one more point in there, because someone asked me this question in the last presentation. When is the hiring pause going to end? When can we go back and do this? And so I just want to say again, the positions that we are not filling this year, we can afford them. They are budgeted positions, and our budget, more or less, should have worked for this year. It passed and went through. It was adopted. So we can afford those positions. Now, if we are successful this year in spending less money, and HR knows this because I've had a conversation with them, I mean, we're going to open up the stable and we're going to have a pretty intense recruitment season, come in the fall to start to fill positions. Now, we've gone a whole year, though, without some positions. And so some curated conversations, with all levels of leadership, and nothing made in a vacuum again, will be, we've gone a year. Do we really need this role? Do we really need this role? Because if we save the money for this role, then maybe that's another investment in another program, or, another faculty member or something else. It doesn't just go back to a pot to do something that no one sees about that just disappears. What about the savings from there? What about this? It goes back to the benefit of everybody from it. And at least, for the things that I care about, from my background, I'd like to see the college build up a healthy savings account from it, so that if we do have a really bad rainy day, that we don't have to get to a place where, in order to sustain this, we have to do something that would be worse, which, in my mind would be riffing staff or riffing people that make this place what it is from it.
Well, I'm hearing you say a lot of asking us and all of us collectively to really rethink how we see ourselves, our programs, and the service that we're providing to our students, that you're really asking us to be intentional about it, and to see ourselves as part of a collective, which sometimes it's hard.
Yep.
We get into our silos, and we're very full of our own self-importance, present company included, myself,
Yeah.
And so I really like the fact that you're asking us to think about how we fit into the overall puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and give people, how do you ensure that these processes, because you've listed a lot of people at the table, but how does it become good financial management and structure? And rather than into the old silo political stuff. And I think that my experience is that's how some of this stuff got us here.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I've had a couple of the presidents come down and say, it's kind of strange. Like, we talk about shared governance, we talk about diversity, and I'm in a meeting with 6 people, and then we're like, okay, we're done with the budget meeting. We're going to talk about something else. And the same people get up from that room and go into the next room, and he sits down. It's like it's the same people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so how do you keep these decisions becoming like very political in terms of power structure? Like people like us, we don't get at your table. We're just down here doing the work. My job is to trust you.
Yep.
That you're going to empower us to be successful and not limp along and then become the problem.
Right.
Like, I just don't understand, the Mesa, what is it, that awards we got?
Oh, we're Professors of the Year, Mesa Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, the Mesa Chamber of Commerce came over here and visited the New Media Lab and gave me the award for the year. Mm-hmm. And the $500 they gave us bought that, right? So you see the outside people like look at what we do and take the time to really understand what we do. Mm-hmm. And like, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. But then, it's like every year you're up at like, it's maddening sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. But how do you ensure that structure doesn't happen? Do you understand? Am I making myself clear?
Yeah. So I think, I do think that and I don't want to speak, about what the circumstances are of previous leadership and too much. I've certainly heard the stories that, if your leadership group does not look united from it, if there's fracturing within that right there, then that contributes to forming silos. Mm-hmm. And I do think that there's some healthy education that needs to happen from what I've observed here about where does everyone's role fit in the academy, right? If you're staff and you're versus faculty versus administration, and staff who are administration and everything going into it, what is our broader role in the academy from it? And so I think, an example of what I've said about that is that in some cases, if faculty are doing something that staff doesn't like, then staff are not doing their job from it. And so, I had a couple of examples that I'll talk about that I certainly don't want to embarrass anyone, but I think everything went really, really well from all of it. And I've said this to our team before, like if you don't like what faculty are doing, then it's probably something that we have to look at and figure out how to do it. Faculty are a community of scholars that come here and impart excellent knowledge upon students. And when they engage in sort of the operations of the college, if they're not getting service, then in my mind, I think they're right to conclude I'm going to be a leader and just do it myself from it. So where are we to be that glue that bridges faculty to the institution, to students, to come into all of it? With technology, in the case of CTS, with our facilities, in the case of facilities, with our financial piece of it, with the case of fiscal services, how are we providing that service? And so, when we talk about the division of administrative services, both words in that are incredibly important. We do administrative work, but service is the vehicle by which how we do that. And so, and I think, and everyone that certainly is in admin services, I think is fantastic, and I've enjoyed getting to know all of them. But I think it would be helpful if we all sort of had a deeper thought about what does it mean to provide service? How does it fill our buckets? How does it sustain us? If we're here and we don't think about our roles distinctly and we sort of blend ourselves into this notion that we're all just kind of here to serve students, and maybe I'm a younger person, within my career, and I look across the fence at the faculty that come in and, they get summers off and they get all these days off, and in some cases they might make more. I want to be that person too, right? And go into it. So then it gets this sense of, well, why, if not them, then why not me? And, and back and forth and going into all of it. And I think that, within our own lanes that we have right here, there are ways to sort of have our own growth in the career path that we've chosen. And I'll give an example of this. Sometimes it's hard to explain to parents what it is that you do. What do you do? Well, I work in higher ed. Well, what do you do? Are you faculty? No, I'm not faculty. Well, I'm a higher ed administrator. I work in higher ed. Well, what do you do? I do business. Oh, okay, I get it. Now I get business. But it's that layer first of I'm a higher ed administrator. So what does that mean? from it? How does my role work in that? And that's something that I think that would be of benefit to spend some more time thinking about how that informs my identity from it. Business is just the sort of the vehicle of how I execute my work. But I am a higher education administrator, I would say, is the much more umbrella definition of what I do. If you want to be a master of a discipline and you want to go the route of faculty and get a PhD, there's a lot of work that goes into all that. I have 2 master's degrees, and I'll probably will start a doctoral degree program at some point soon. But, again, I think that my lane is sort of a higher education administrator. Now, on a very, very high level, I still see sort of my heart and soul as an educator. I'm keeping that very generic as just an educator. I would argue that I think and I'll say, I've said this about Ginger many times, and I'll say it again, but this is where I find a lot in common with her. And you've mentioned this in the conversation we had first, right? You don't come off like a very typical business person, right? You don't look that way. So what I take great joy in explaining what I do and getting other people excited about it from it. So I like to take very complex things like a massive spreadsheet of $111 million and break it down and figure out an on-ramp so that other people at the institution have a way to engage and see that, because they do care about it. And sometimes finance work is hard to penetrate into. We kind of, leave it over to them, leave it to the wonks that sit in front of the Excel sheet. But I'm an educator at sort of a higher level, and I enjoy talking about it and teaching other people if they're interested in hearing it.
Well, you spoke about what got you in, and we did a podcast with our governing board member, Tom Narini. And I was really inspired by his story, and you reminded me of it. You got in, you weren't the perfect student, right? But you got in and you found your passion working with students. And you did that until at one point you realized that one-on-one wasn't really enough. And this is what I interpreted from what you said, that the level that you wanted to have, the degree of impact, you needed to get higher, that you needed to get into a position where you could impact the opportunities for students on a larger scale, the people that you cared about, the passion that you had. Mm-hmm. Did I hear you correctly?
I think you nailed it. I think that's exactly it. The things that it comes down to the individual, but I want to increase my impact on many, many, many individuals for all time from it. And one of the beautiful things about working with money is that not only are you impacting the students of today, but that which you choose not to spend also has value for the students of tomorrow. And so I do think, and I have thought and have presented on in the past about the student right now who is a sophomore in high school that might be in a lower income family or might be working multiple jobs or parents looking their jobs. If we love our experience that we have today for our students, how are we going to be sure that when that student chooses to come to college, that the same consistent quality experience is there for them too, at the same level? And I'm talking on things like the degradation of our facilities, right? It looks great today, but in 5 years, after 5 years of sun, it might not. Well, I want that student to have the same experience. I mentioned facilities, obviously, because I'm a student housing background. And so the facilities play a big role in that. But I also think it's about the people and the experiences that come into it. How do we ensure that we are providing the same consistent, high quality experience in perpetuity? And that's part of where I think finance becomes attractive to me, because it allows me to have an impact in making decisions that guarantees that.
So you're talking about now, and I love that, but you're also talking about our actions now and the impact it's going to have on the future. So with that in mind, I have a phrase that I wonder if you might be able to complete. We can never go back.
God, I have to think about how I'd respond to that. I think we can never go back to not paying attention, how I would say that. I think, so let me carry on that a little bit further. We can never go back to not paying attention. We can only go forward and commit to doing better from it. And I think that would be sort of the motto that I would stand by. I don't think it's worth, and for anyone that wants to have an interesting conversation about what I think happened, that's a wonderful offline conversation. But I find great joy in, if I'm in charge of something, All right. I find joy in being able to say I can understand and control all of it and ideally make it better. And I'm not just sort of at the whims of what do I get this year? What do I get this year? I can do more. And so if more people sort of look at it that way, or if I could hope to inspire people to see it that way, then they'll get more engaged in their budget from it. And I think that there are two things that, and this is very simple, to make yourself a better budget manager. You have to simply pay attention and then have an explanation for what changes. And so you would be surprised as to how many people they don't even look at their budget all year, much less once a semester. From it, I mean, we can probably pull up on our phones right now our Bank of America accounts, our Chase accounts, and check our balance maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times a day, or even right after you make a transaction. But people don't look at their budgets all year. And if you simply paid attention to it, you would be in such a better place of control in terms of understanding it.
There's the new format for our budgets that we're working on. We're in this portion right now. Because before it would just be like, I'd be like, hey, are we on? And, so thank you for creating this.
Yeah, I think so. I want to give credit to our fiscal services area, and they've helped a lot about this. And again, I call Ginger my ride or die, but that team, they're an excellent team as well, too, as I think all the teams are, I think in admin services that I've met so far. I want to plug for the budget piece right there. And this is what I spoke about today at the first roadshow here on the Southern and Dobson campus. I am interested in understanding how you define what you think your core expenses are, meaning that if I even cut $1 out of it, you'd have to fold and say, I can't move forward from it. And the benefit of that for me is that if you help me identify that, then I can predict the core cost of the college from it. And so if your core expenses stay relatively flat or don't increase by tens of thousands of dollars every year, they should just move by inflationary numbers, right? 1%, 2%. If it's got some predictability to it, then great. Then I can take a look at everything else, how much we're getting in, minus our core expenses, have money left over to make more investments, and then even have money further left over to put into a rainy day fund. And that's what I'm trying to get to. And I don't think that the college has been stewarded in such a way to help people understand, break out these things, and then let's come back and in a shared governance format, decide what we want to do after we've paid our bills. We have this leftover piece right here from it, and getting people sort of onboarded to the philosophical design of what I'm trying to do, I think helps this place out.
The training, we've all been asked to go through this performance success training. Mm-hmm. What came up in it, that a healthy system are people that take ownership, right, of their own projects and are valued in that way, taking responsibility for outcomes and being empowered to make decisions that will lead to those outcomes. I think your perspective, what I'm hearing today, really supports that. And I think it's going to bring a lot of good fortune for us as a community where, we're no longer, we're in the dark about everything, like who's making these decisions and stuff. Right. We've been living like that for so long. When I hear you talk, I'm like, I can't believe this. This is what we've been wanting, right, forever, is someone that can treat us like adults.
Remember, you're not leaving, right?
Yeah, you can't leave or
right.
become a president at another college in the next 10 minutes. Okay.
So I had the great fortune of having lunch yesterday with Dr. Harrison, and she was the faculty senate president in 2017, and she's in that role again today, and it was a great conversation, and I'm still sort of high as a kite on all of it, and just thinking of, I can see in her face, she misses sort of the faculty collegiality, I think. And, as we're challenged and wrestling through the challenge of asking staff to return to work, faculty have their own process to sort of look at expectations of attendance and participation and so forth. And I see from her, she misses the collegiality of having so many people around. And when they're not, it makes her, ironically, somewhat more of an administrator. Well, I must hold you accountable to a policy that's written, when instead, what she just wants is people around from it that are sort of within faculty to do a role of being a community of scholars. And so, I appreciated that. And, she shared with me, obviously, things that had happened in the past and just different conversations that have happened. And I scratch my head. I mean, you asked like head scratching moments right there. I mean, how did that happen? And so, all I can say is, and I feel like I'm very confident to speak for myself and the president and our other vice presidents. All of us would find some of these stories that we've heard, I think, bizarre, and we wouldn't even sort of classify that in the context of, well, this is how we think leadership should work in a higher education context. And so I believe that no one of us would ever think it a wise idea to make decisions in a vacuum. And I've heard our president say that. And I've said at my first roadshow as well, too. And just knowing some of the strong emotion, I think it tied to a lot of staff and faculty here that are longtime stakeholders. I think it's unfortunate that we are in this position today in a budget crisis. I think it's very unfortunate. And it's unfortunate when I'm announcing this as a brand new person and most people around the room have absolutely no idea and can't speak fluently as to how we got here. And so, I wish I could go back in time and have prevented all of it. And obviously I can't. But, as someone that just earnestly wants to try, I will continue to show up every day and do everything I can to lead all of us out of this mess, and not just do it for myself or run it for myself or make quick decisions for it.
I appreciate you saying, Dr. Harrison, because in my building, when I first came, and I came in 2001, we used to have lunch together, and there was a big table, and all the disciplines would sit and talk, and it was powerful. And so there was a few of us in the building I'm in that are really trying to reconstitute that. And we see each other, hey, lunch, and we're heating our lunch up, and we're talking about all kinds of things. Yep. So I loved it that you heard that.
She's also referencing like the first 15 years that I worked here. This was like family. People looked after each other. We weren't, cutting up the cake in certain ways. We were doing our jobs. I think we were flush financially too, but it felt like that. It felt like a great Mesa family, and everyone was on board. And it's slowly just deteriorated. But I think we're on the right track. I think
finding ways to collaborate and finding ways to bring our expertise. And again, I see that happening from a faculty side. And in your role, what do you foresee for MCC in the next 5 years, considering all the factors affecting our college?
So I think that it's a really interesting time in higher education. I think it's an interesting time at MCC. The largest statistics that have meaning to me, I think, is the significant decline in confidence in higher education as a whole since 2015. I've seen the chart in my mind, but it's like a 30% dip. And so that is a little existential to me. That makes me a little scared from it. This is I've lived most of my life on a college campus. And so the notion that we would somehow be seen sort of nationally as irrelevant, it just doesn't fit in my schema of the value that I think higher education does for people. I think for MCC, I do think we have good days ahead of us. I think that we're sort of uniquely in a good spot. I think the city of Mesa, 35th largest city, I think has had some really great leadership with Mayor Giles. And I would expect the standard that he set to be something that would be upheld from it. And so I see a lot of growth out here from an economic standpoint. I think our FTSE is going to continue to go up from it. I think that there's an opportunity to capitalize on a national dialogue about the benefits of workforce education. As a father of two sons, I have some sensitivity about the declining outcomes of just young men in general. And so I think this is a right place, right time for me to be here to see that. I think that for us in general, the phrase that I'll use, and I'll quote the president again, I think, we have to move into a period of carefully controlled growth from it. And that's different, I think, than how we're typically used to in higher ed, where, especially during the pandemic, at times, from my time at ASU, we see education as sort of as a human right. We are going to stay open and have our doors open, even though there's a little bit of a business incentive into it. we are going to stay open and we're going to educate right through the pandemic, right? We're not going to close down. So there is a kind of a moral righteousness that comes with the sense of doing that. Anybody that wants an education, access and inclusion, these things are very empowering for us, more going into all of it. But sometimes especially in some cases, our workforce programs, they're very, very expensive from it. And so we don't want to get into a place where our desire to evangelize education ends up undermining our ability to do sort of our core good in other areas as well too. And so, as our bandwidth increases, we will always see a small incremental amount of growth. We have to be careful about how that growth rolls out so that we're not sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul, if you will, or subsidizing other programs on the back of some programs, that we are growing in a controlled and careful manner.
We've covered a lot of ground today, and we have another student, former student, walk in the room who is a superstar at ASU, gone through this program. Amanda, we're glad you walked in. But Bernard, would you ask us the last question, please?
Yes. What can the college do to help you be successful going forward?
I think that I would say a couple of quick things. One, feel free to come and have a conversation. Instead of reacting or being upset or firing off an email, give me a chance and come and talk to me first. I think that starts first. I enjoy meeting people and talking. I'd love to do that. I'm not a personality that's going to be like, I cast you off of Olympus, or type thing like that. I want to have a conversation first. I would say the second thing is that, on yourself, it's what can you do to help yourself? And so in some regards, like, let me help you help yourself. And how can I make you more engaged in a critical piece of what really kind of is your job? Budget management should be your job if you're a small slice of it. But have the courage to come and ask for help. And again, I think, and I can certainly hear this in you, Eddie, and while I'm sure that you understand what your costs are, other people might not necessarily be in the same place. And so it's okay to be an incredible thought leader in your field and absolutely have no experience at finance whatsoever. And we don't bite from it. And I think that this is where I will credit Ginger again. I'm extremely proud of the fact that she is excited about working with people to get them excited. I see her as an educator first and a fiscal manager second going into it, which is why she's the right person for the role.
So we like to give our guests their final word. What would you like to say to Mesa Community College that you haven't said in your town halls?
I would say again that I look at the opportunity that I have in this role as a privilege from it. And, I'm proud of the work that I've done to get here, but it is very much a privilege to be here. And so I said this in my interview, but I don't think that I've said this again. I approach each day saying that I feel like I need to continually earn this job every single day. And that's just the mindset that I begin with. And so, I'd say it again. Like I come in here saying every day I need to earn this role. I'm going into all of it. I have a lot of responsibility. The people that are in admin services, to taxpayers, to students especially, and to all the people that help in this ecosystem, which includes staff and faculty going into it. There's less of me than there are of faculty. And so there's a responsibility, I think, on that part, which I do take very seriously.
Dr. Hypley.
I love the fact that you said you have to earn this job every day. And I look at this role that I have. I look at the freedoms that I have. I look at the money that I make. And I feel absolute joy and responsibility that I am working with people who are hopeful, who may have had challenges getting here. I work with people who want to be teachers and they want to go out and, make lives better for students. And I can't think of a more exciting, joyful job, but it's one that I have to work at every day. And I never forget the absolute privilege and blessing I have to be here. So I appreciate what you said.
Yeah, agreed. I'm working on letting go of the past, living in now, living in the future, because it's been tough around here, man. And yeah, it's the thrill of my life to be a teacher. I love what I do. And we have exceptionally gifted faculty on this campus. So yeah, I want to thank you for letting us get to know you today. I feel just Yeah. Thank you, man. Thank you. I really feel confident in your work, and I feel included. And even if that means cuts for us or whatever, but not, don't take the body. If you need a finger or something, we could do it that way. Bernard, do you have some last thoughts?
Just one thought. The moment you realized you could be an Eagle Scout, what was that like for you?
So I actually finished my Eagle Scout project 2 days before my 18th birthday. So I was lucky in the timeline to do that. I would say that the critical lesson that I learned from that about leadership in general is that, regardless of the work that I had a bunch of people that were here to help my Eagle project. And we were beginning our work for the day, and I started to just, work alongside everyone. And one of the leaders, or whether, someone, it might have even been people in my own family that were there to help, pulled me aside and said, you can't do that. And I said, why? And like, because you're not here to do the work, you're here to lead them. And it was very hard for me to not want to dive in there and help them out. I'm like, you guys are here working for me, right? I mean, your hours are doing this right here. But they got on board with that, and it was an impactful lesson about leadership in general. And leadership is it's an interesting concept. I mean, if you go into any bookstore, you can buy it. There's 1,001 books that'll tell you how to do it better than the one next to it, going into any of it. So I sort of hate to dwell on, leadership as a philosophical topic from it, but that was a good life lesson right there about how to work with other people in a position where I had a role that I had to give them instructions and have them perform. That's a better way to say it.
Thank you.
So again, thank you for being here at the New Media Lab podcast series. In my dad's language, we say, Wantan, Kali Hiliga, Aya Haski, Eri, Ta Wantan, Unokane, Wantan, Kali Hiliga. And remember, everyone, to take care of each other out there, because we are all we have. Hawa, hawa.